Welcome to the Thought Diaries, a podcast dedicated to mental health, neuroscience and trauma. I'm your host, Roxanne, owner of Helix Trauma Training and founder of Trauma Healing UK. So obviously we were going to speak about trauma and how it affects our sense of self, but I was reading your book, Michael, last night, and I came across a section that said about you going in the shower, and
Right.
and I thought I was the only person that did that. I actually laughed out loud because, every time I lose 3 hours and I have no idea how many times I've washed my hair.
I thought I was the only person, Roxanne, that done it. So to hear someone else that says and openly says they've done that, and you've said it on a podcast now as well, so even more people know. So, but how strange is it?
Oh, well, I've got conditioner to add into the mix as well. So I've got to
I don't have that problem.
conditioner and shower gel. And then I laughed when you said about the squeaky hair thing, because that's the only way I could figure out if I've washed my hair.
Absolutely. And I think the message for me when it was happening, it would freak me out because I would think to myself, how can I not remember something that I might just have done, 30 seconds ago or however long it is? And I'm touching it, and of course you've got wet hands anyway, and I'm like, did I do it? Did I not do it? And it really got to me, and I know we're kind of laughing, but it would really get to me and thinking, why can't I remember what I've just done? And then you really self-analyze yourself, and that for me at that time, it was a dangerous thing to do because you then start to think, my goodness, if I can't remember what I did 5 minutes ago in the shower, whether I've got conditioner on or shower gel or whatever, what hope is there? I'm never going, I'm worthless and all of that. Everything just takes a nosedive after that. Now I just kind of laugh at it and go, how's that? I can't, and because I'm a different person now, but at the time, and that's why I put it in the book, because I just thought, it's just silly when it happened to me, but it really had a negative effect on me,
But I was completely the same, because mine's is probably tied into my mental health as well, because my memory is terrible and it's got worse over the years. And that's the one thing that I really got hung up on and would beat myself up. So, well, as you're saying, we're laughing about it, but I just couldn't get over the fact that I just can't remember things. And especially as a child, where I went to school and I stuck in and I did well. But as I've seen sort of my memory deteriorate, that was part of my identity, being good at school. And now I can't remember. I can't remember how many times I've washed my hair. It's 3 hours later and I can't remember any of it.
There is something self-satisfying knowing that you're extremely clean, because you've washed and re-washed and so on. But that only goes so far. But I completely agree with you with the memory thing. For me, that is it was a real big thing for me. Now I just accept that my memory isn't as good because of all the trauma that I've been through. But it was really, really difficult for me until I accepted it as part of, if it's the remnants of my trauma and that's really all there is, then I can live with it and I'll make a joke of it and I'll make fun of it. But more importantly, I'll be okay with it. But it took me a long, long time to get to that point, because whenever I would meet someone, and I can't remember if I say it in the book, I probably do, but whenever I'd meet someone, I would have that panic of, I can't remember who you are. I know that I know you, but I can't remember how, where, and why. And the fear inside me would just be that they must think I'm rude, they must think all of that. So I would just pretend that I knew them and all of that sort of stuff. And that sounds funny now because we're naturally laughing about it. But at the time, you're struck by that fear of, they're going to think bad of me because I've forgotten this, and I don't want to tell them I've forgotten, because naturally we never want to say I've forgotten your name because it seemed rude. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that. And what I kind of talking about this last night actually to a friend, that all my memories are bad memories. There's not really many memories that I've got that I go, do you know what? I really remember that was a beautiful time for me, and particularly in my younger days. And I had this thing that, when my father was alive, and it was a really toxic household, the abuse and all that sort of stuff that suffered. But my mum was very narcissistic, but I never knew that at the time. I just thought this behaviour was all normal. I was joking about that last night. I got a doing every day until I was 16, and you think everybody's getting a doing, you know, getting a beating up until they're 16, and you start working and realise that that's not normal at all. But my mother would always say that your father ruins Christmas. I don't like Christmas because your father always ruins it. I have no memories of any Christmases being ruined. But I was always brought up with that narrative of Christmases are really bad, they're really bad, they're really bad. But I don't remember that. And I was chatting to my friend last night, and I was saying, you know, but it's ironic because one memory that I do have of Christmas is as a 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old. And you won't remember this, Roxanne, because you're a lot younger than me. But back in those days, in Christmas Day, pubs would open from 11 and shut at like 2, 2:30, then open at 5, and that would be then. So at the back of 2, you'd be kicked out. But this Christmas, as I said, about 15 or 16, my old man said to me, "Do you want to go down for a pint?" We stayed in the Gorbos, and there was a wee local pub. And I went in there, and it was all my uncles. It was just like brilliant. It was just, you know, and I know that's maybe like a man bonding thing, father and son. I get all of that. And I had a couple of pints, and great. We went back for Christmas dinner. My mum had made it, and then went to the pub later on that night. And it's the only real Christmas that I can ever remember in any of my childhood. So I have a completely different narrative of, you know, Christmas was always a bad time because your father ruined it. But I don't remember any ruined Christmas. I'm quite the opposite and think, I look at that Christmas and think, do you know what, that was the best Christmas I can remember. For a lot of reasons and a lot of levels, obviously, psychological. But I'm glad that I can remember that. You know, that's the one Christmas memory that I can remember and I hold dear, you know, so...
It's interesting though, and it ties in with what we're going to talk about, that as you're growing up, you normalise things because that's all you know. And that's I mean, we depend on these people for survival. So we learn from them. And you just go, this is totally normal. You know something's wrong and you feel, you're having feelings, but you just assume that, because that's just how life is.
I'm sorry, I mean, I can always say that, you know, I'd be abused by both my parents on a daily basis. I thought everybody, I thought it happened to everybody. I thought that I could never speak about it to anyone, because I think I'd said maybe privately to you in our conversations that even though you've been abused, you don't want to tell anybody in authority because you believe that something worse is going to happen to you, because that's what you're told. Social work will come and they'll take you away. So even though you've got you've been beaten up and all of these things are happening, you still think that something worse is going to happen to you because that's what someone's told you. And, you know, as you just said, that you normalise it and you live your life thinking, right, so I can't tell anyone because something worse will happen. Right? Even though you might not know what it is, you know, you're filled with that narrative, and it's not necessarily true.
Did you ever question whether it was that bad or whether it was just in your head? Did you ever experience that?
Yeah, I just always thought that I didn't at the time think it was bad because it was normal. It's like when you have the toothache and after a couple of days you live with the pain because your pain threshold increases. I think I just had such a high threshold of that abuse that it was just, it was kind of like, you know, the first time that you tell somebody that you get a doing all the time and they're saying that never happens to them. And you think that they're the weird one, they're the strange one because, you know, you've got such a strange life that you don't get this happening to you, you know. And you go, no, Michael, it's the other way around. That regular people, that doesn't happen in regular lives. And I'll tell you a funny thing last night about, I was having a chat with this guy, and it's the same idea that, you know, I was kind of talking about, you know, this help out to eat out thing just now, you know, and my son's 4 and, you know, we take him for a bite to eat and stuff like that, but that never happened when I was younger. And I get times are different. And I was saying to the guy, the first time I ever went for a lunch was when I started work. And in the workplace, they said, come on, we'll all go for lunch together. I had no idea what that was all about. I didn't know that people did. I didn't know that people did that. So I remember I went for lunch and I was totally perplexed on what you meant to do. And we went for an Indian, and I'd never had an Indian meal. Right, I'd managed to get to 16 or 17 because the culture in my household was that my parents would have that. We never had that. I never had. They would have that as their dinner. I would have to have, you know, they never bought, you know, I wasn't good enough to get that. I was always the bad child or whatever. So they would sit and eat an Indian or whatever. And the same with a Chinese. And I remember sitting there the first day going, I don't know what's that, Papa Dog, what's that? And people like it, you're laughing at it going, but how can that be? But that was the narrative for my life that, and I was kind of joking last night that my old man would go and buy a Chinese for him and my mum and buy it and sit and eat it. And I didn't know what a Chinese was like till I was 16 or 17 again, until I personally went and bought one, out for a night and went for a Chinese and a way home or something like that. And I went in and I'm saying, I don't know what any of this stuff is. And what's the most blandest thing you can get? Chicken fried rice, that'll do. And it was like, wow. And who's ever went wow for a chicken fried rice,
But we go from our parents telling us narrating our world to then society narrating our world on what's right and what's wrong, and we get so involved in it because we sometimes don't know anything else.
Yeah, I only changed or learned to realise that it was a narrative of my life when after my mental health breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
I went through my whole life believing the narrative of my parents telling me at an early age that you're this, you're that, you'll never amount to anything, and always trying to prove them wrong almost, that way that you're trying to get a career going, but you hear this in your mind, you're worthless, you're all of that.
Yeah.
And ultimately that led me to the precipice of suicide. And then when I went into recovery, as I always call it, that was really the first time that somebody says to me, right, tell me what the narrative of your life is.
Yeah.
And I kind of didn't know what the person meant. It was like, tell me what the story is that you've been told about you from an early age and what you say. And then I told her and she went, okay, so you do know that you don't need to believe that? Or I'm going to tell you that you don't need to believe that. And it was like, but I do, because that's what everyone's told me.
Yeah.
And then when you have that moment of awakening of, so I could just rewrite all of that. I can just now disregard all of that. I don't need to believe that. I can be this and be perfect acceptance of it. I can be the person that takes ages in the shower because I can't remember, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and that is like acceptance. Because I had the other, and I'm sure you have experienced this as well, Michael. Is that there is the normal in terms of society, and I didn't quite fit in with that. So those like forgetting stuff, and then I'd go, well, there's something wrong with me because no one else seems to experience this.
Yeah.
And it was a problem with memory, but I became really ashamed because there's just something wrong, and I fought it and I tried to avoid it, and that made things so much worse.
Yeah. It's like you don't want anyone to know.
No.
You're fearful of that. You're fearful of that judgment, because if people find out and they judge you on it, you're going to be the person that forgets things or whatever it is, So for me, it was, you're the person that was abused. When my old man was murdered, it was going to be, oh, you're the son of such and such who was murdered. And you're trying to keep all of that in because you don't want to be judged that way. You don't want to be seen as that person.
Yeah.
But you're not being you. You're not being authentic to yourself as well. But you're so terrified of, other people, finding out about that, or you being labelled or being judged. For me, it was all about being labelled and being judged. And I spent, 47 years of my life running away from that fear of being judged and labelled as Michael, who's this, Michael, who's that. So it was just a front and a facade all my life. And looking back, I hated it because people would meet me and they would always say, "Oh, Michael's a big, happy, confident guy." That was just what the face that I put on. And I knew that that disarmed a lot of people because they don't look beyond that. They just think if you're happy and smiley, people think, oh, he's happy, can he have a care in the world? But it's a facade, it's only a facade,
I also had that opposite. If I was to say I'm really struggling with my memory, I'd get, oh, you're just a wee bit stressed. And I'm like, this is a real struggle for me. So it was minimized. And I was like, why? I'm really struggling, and you're just telling me, oh, you're stressed, go for a walk, get over it. I was like, what do? I can't tell anyone. I can't, and these were people who were, I guess, professionals. So if they couldn't help you.
I know, and I remember when I was 25, 26 when my old man was murdered, and the only organisation that was really about at that time was Victim Support Scotland.
Yeah.
And, I love the work that Victim Support Scotland do. I don't have any concern with them. But I was 25, 26. there was no way on earth that I was going to go and talk to Victim Support Scotland as a 25-year-old Glaswegian guy who had to live up to this image of, guys don't talk and all of that garbage as it is. So there was no avenue for me to get that. It was just about, I won't talk, I won't say anything, I'll keep it all in, and it'll vent in some other way. And that's exactly what happened. It just came out, maybe you want to party like Paul Gascoigne and stuff like that, so because that was just a manifestation of no talking about it. Because again, I didn't get it minimised as such because I never opened up enough for MD to minimise it for me, because even for me to say I'm kind of struggling a bit, my old man would just have been too much for me, going back to that childhood thing of don't tell MD because something worse is going to happen. So I was even too fearful to say to somebody, I'm struggling, because I thought that what would happen then, that would define me. That would be someone would just say, that's Michael, he's, the opposite of what I'm trying to portray,
Yeah, I think I got that response because I've, unlike you, I've maybe not got the sort of the big milestone traumas. So it would be, oh, you've got a great life, everything's perfect. How can you be struggling with your mental health? How can you be struggling with your memory? You're just young, you're just stressed. Everybody like that. And I knew that there was something wrong. And so I just got so frustrated, and I then put that inwards and just beat myself up all the time.
Especially when you take that step to speak about it. And I think that's what people miss sometimes, So when I always say that when guys come to support groups, they'll generally say it's the second time they've been there, because the first time they've sat out in the car park. Because it does take a lot, and I mean that metaphorically as well, that it does take a lot for you to think and build up that courage to say, I'm going to own up to a problem that I've got and I'm going to seek help or advice. And then, once you've done that, to almost be poo-pooed and someone saying, oh, it's no big deal, what you're worrying about, or whatever, it's kind of like, but this is the biggest thing that's going on in my life right now, and I need help, I need support. And I suppose it's that, I think that if you speak to people who've been through something similar, they absolutely get it. So you and I speaking about it, we get it. We're having a laugh about shower things and all that, because we know what it's like. We've had first-hand experience of it. And I think that sometimes we can put too much stock in people who haven't been through these things, and we perhaps open up to the wrong people because you think they're family and they can help you. But it's a wee bit like I always say, that if you've never been to Greece, you don't know what Greece is like other than what you've seen on the telly and stuff like that. So that forms your opinion on it. But it's no reality. But if you've been to that destination, you know exactly what it's like. And I always say that when you've been to the destination of trauma, whatever guise that may be, you can absolutely talk to someone else about it, in an open way, as long as it's, a conducive environment. And it'll be far more relatable, and you won't get the, oh, you'll be all right. It'll be, you've got that as well, I've got it, I've done this, right? And
that's why I really enjoy talking to you, Michael, because you are so frank and open, and we can chat. Like last week we were talking about suicide, and it's just, there's no holding back. There's no need to hold back.
No, absolutely not. Once I use this scenario, and if you don't mind, I'll do it with yourself. I can't remember if we've done this before, but if we have, just play along with it. So if you're going on holiday, right, let's just put a scenario. You're going on holiday to Greece, let's just say Greece, and you go to Glasgow Airport, if you go from Glasgow Airport or Edinburgh Airport, and everyone speaks the same language. Okay, we may sound a bit different, but generally everyone speaks English or whatever, and tone may be different like yours and I, but you go to the airport and you feel safe, secure, because everyone's speaking the same language as you. You get on the plane, there's less of you, but you're okay, you're all right. You then get to the airport, let's just say Kos Airport, and you get on the transfer bus that's going to take you to your apartment or your hotel. You get on, and there's less of you, and you can hear some different voices, because there's people there from Germany or Holland or whatever, Spain, whatever, holidaying in the same place. And you begin to think, well, this is a bit strange, I'm hearing different languages and voices, but it's okay. You get to your holiday destination and you get off the transfer bus. Now, we've all done that where you're thinking, I hope I'm not the only person that's going to get off here. And you get off the bus and you look around and you think, I'm on my own here. You step into the hotel and the apartments, you check in, you go upstairs, you unpack, have a shower, you're there for about 3 hours if it's you and I, because you've forgotten where you've washed your hair and all that stuff. And then you think, I'm going to go downstairs, I'm going to get a bite to eat in the hotel bar.
Yeah.
You go into the hotel bar and everyone's speaking Greek, German, Dutch, Spanish. You're hearing all these different voices and you start to think, I can't communicate with anyone else.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to communicate. I'm not going to be able to get this out. No one's going to be able to understand me. I'm going to sound silly because I don't speak their language. They're not going to speak, same as me. And then you hear, let's just say a Scottish accent somewhere in the pub somewhere, you hear a Scottish accent. What do?
You go speak to them.
You go and speak to them. You gravitate towards them.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone gives that exact answer. And why do you gravitate towards them?
Because there's that commonality between, it's
language.
security as well, Michael, is that you are in this kind of fearful environment, and it is fearful because there's uncertainty.
Yep.
If you can't communicate, then how are you going to order food? How are you going to go anywhere, get a bus? And then you have that one person who speaks that language.
Yeah.
So you know that.
And that's exactly the answer. And that's how I explain poor mental health.
Yeah.
Okay. That when you're struggling with your mental health, and I'm just using this as my own experience, I'm not preaching to anyone, that when I was struggling, I was the guy who walked into that pub and everyone's speaking a different language. Mm-hmm. And I think, I can't talk to anyone, I can't communicate. Yeah. How am I going to get through this? Because just as you said there, I'm not going to be able to order food, and that's a metaphor for something else, I'm not going to be able to survive this and a whole load of things. But then when you come across somebody who understands your language, that language of trauma, what you've been through, everything's better because you've found someone who speaks the same language as you. You've found someone that you can communicate with, who understands what you're saying. And I think that's why people like yourself and I, who can talk openly about trauma, get people who openly gravitate towards us. And it's a door opener for a lot of people because they'll then think, it happens all the time. I've heard Roxanne talk about that. Wouldn't you mind to have a chat with her about it because I've got this? Yeah. Or Michael speaks about that. What the hell, I've been through. Mm-hmm. Sorry, when you say bloody on a podcast. Twice. But I've been through that. Wouldn't you mind talking to Michael? So you gravitate towards people who want to speak about their lived experience because you think if they can talk about it, they'll know what I'm going through. And I think that's the difference.
It's an evolutionary adaptation because the survival thing is actually real. Because if you're different from your community and your environment, then they're going to chuck you out. You're on your own.
Yeah.
So you have to start your own little community.
That was my line. You can see you're the therapist, I'm catching up. But and that's what I say when I talk to people about work that I do and stuff like that, because the loads of people are that metaphoric person in the bar. They believe that nobody's going to understand them and stuff like that. But then when you say to them, look, I'm the voice, we can communicate. And actually, I know loads of other people who've been through trauma, who are open about it. That then becomes that community, and that then becomes your support. And certainly for me, when I was really struggling, peer support groups worked really well for me, because when I was communicating with friends and family, they weren't getting it. And why would they? Because they've not been to the mental health destination that I'm currently at. But when I would go to the support groups, you're in an environment that everyone's the same. So you're disarmed and you're open and you can chat about it. And it makes the world of a difference because no one's judging you.
And if you can communicate, what do? You don't speak. And you sit and you go, that's when you start to internalize there's something wrong because I can't understand. So I just won't speak because it's safer not to speak than to be found out as the person who speaks a different language.
Absolutely. When we were on the support group, certainly in the early days, and a new chap would come along, it's almost his first words would be, I'm not going to talk, I'm just here to see what it's like and stuff like that. No, I'm like, no bother. And then, everyone has this thought that, mental health groups are all in a big circle and everybody sits there and it's sort of 10 minutes of doom and gloom and all that. It's not really like that. You can make it any way you want it to be. For us, it's a bit of a laugh, the support network, and anybody can talk about anything and there's no judgment, all of that stuff, all the safe stuff. But I guarantee every person who's ever come into any of our groups, by the time everyone's finished speaking, the person's saying, can I say something? Can I talk? Because they realise that Johnny's sitting across there as a carpet fitter. Jimmy's a bus driver, I'm me and all that sort of stuff. And you realise that actually you're just amongst guys who are just like you. And I know it works for women as well. I'm just talking about my experience.
Of course,
and you realise that actually that guy's just talking about stuff that I really want to talk about, and he just looks okay. And if it's okay for him to do it, I think it'll be all right for me to do it as well. And that transformation happens, and you see it in front of you. It's brilliant.
And it's interesting because I'd say people who struggle with their mental health, a majority have a really good sense of humour, and it's a coping mechanism, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's far easier to self-deprecate. Because when you self-deprecate, it stops someone else from doing it, because that's the really hard thing to accept, is when someone else is doing it to you. So it's better to be first to do it to yourself and say, oh, I'm a big numpty, I've got a terrible memory, I can't remember all of this stuff. And that goes back to owning it. And now I openly say to people, I can't remember. See what we might have done 3 weeks ago. I know I was there, but don't expect me to remember too much about what it was. But I'm here, I'm where I'm meant to be, and we can just move on and stuff like that. So it's owning it.
Exactly. What people don't realise as well is it's not just the mental health that's causing these mental health causes changes in the brain. It is a neurological thing. So it is a physical illness. It's not just in your head.
And I mean, I think it took a long time for me, because as we were saying there, you don't really want to open up and say, I've got this, because, society judges us whether we like it or not. And we judge people as well. We judge people on what we see and stuff like that, until you realise that that's just the split second. What actually you need to do is go past that. But a lot of people don't get past that stage.
What changed for me, because I think exactly the same, is when I actually started to realise that I did judge people. And I started to recognise that, I used to beat myself up about having judgmental thoughts as well. Because why am I having these thoughts? But then I realised that was about me. Those judgments were coming from me, absolutely nothing to do with the other person.
Absolutely.
So when I started to realise that I did it, and I could relate that to me, then I could go, well, that's coming from them. That doesn't reflect on me.
Absolutely. I remember probably one of the times that I always look back on, in my career within housing, we overseen a sheltered housing complex. So that was maybe for people who were 50 and older. I'm saying that like I'm not 50 or over, but back then it was 50 and over, and right up until 100 odds and stuff like that. And I remember I got chatting to this man, and the view of everyone else was that he was cantankerous, that he was difficult, that he was all of these things. So everybody just avoided him because they just seen him as awkward. And I think me being me and my mental health struggles, I actually found the guy really warm, and I found him quite funny in a way that we could communicate. So I actually got on really well with him, because just probably my background. But the one thing I realised was that, people are just seeing this guy as a 75-year-old man, let's just say. But actually, when you start talking to him, the guy had been in the war, he was a father, he was a grandfather, he was all of these other things, that he isn't just as you see him just now. That was a real transformation for me, that, my God, I see this guy and I just see him as a 75-year-old man. And okay, you've got this baggage of people saying, oh, he's really difficult and all of that stuff. But actually, he's the accumulation of everything. He's just that way he is now, but that he's got all of this going on as well. He's a grandfather, he's all of this experiences in the war. And I loved all of that. And it was a real lesson for me. And it was just almost like an awakening that day of thinking, yeah, I see people as I see them, but actually they're not. They're just a view of my eyes. That's all it is. And I might think that. So, but you can't help judging people. It's about saying, I might think, judge somebody, but then I have the thought of, no, that's just what you're seeing right now. That's not who and what they are.
It doesn't make it true. And it is, that's where self-awareness comes in. You have to have good self-awareness. And you get past that judgment. It becomes fleeting when you just accept, look, it's just a judgment in my head. And we are naturally designed to judge. We're naturally designed to see everyone as enemies as such, until we try and figure them out. So there's no point trying to avoid that, because it's in our brains are wired that way.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I always speak about the thought process. We can't stop our thoughts. And for me, my thoughts were dangerous, as I've said. So it was about having the thought and then having to do something about it, because I never learned that actually just having the thought's okay. You don't need to do anything about it. It's just a thought. But I never got to that point of realising it until after my breakdown. And I think that's like a real eye opener. It's just a thought, and people always say, "I want to control my thoughts. I want to stop having thoughts." And I'll say, "You're never going to stop having thoughts.
Oh,
What you have to do is learn how to deal with a thought, and or realize that it's just a thought, or a voice is just a voice. It's nothing more than that, you know." So, and I think that when people say is, "I want to stop those thoughts," it's an endless dream. You're never going to be able to do that. What you have to do is learn, just like the judgment, that it's that moment in time. You have to step beyond that moment in time, or step beyond that thought or that judgment, and so on. You know.
what I've struggled is when people tell you to think positively, because I've always found that a really difficult transition when your negative thoughts are coming. So you assume think positively means push all those thoughts away, and then you start dissociating because you can't. You're like, why can't I think positively? I'm trying really hard. I'm trying to push all the negative thoughts away. So I'm cutting off my emotions. And actually, when you go, that's just a negative thought. That's all right. It's so much easier.
Isn't it? I mean, I think that, I think we'll have to be real about it. And there's, no matter what you do, you can be the most positive person in the world. I like to think I'm positive, and I like to think a lot of things. But there are days when it's just tough. There are days when you just feel like, I can't be bothered, right?
Yeah.
I can't be bothered. And it's about saying to yourself, do you know what? It's okay to feel this way today. I might want to have positive thoughts, I might want to have that, but actually, I'm just not feeling it today. And giving yourself that permission to think, you know what, it's okay to feel like that. There's no, certainly for me, when I was in the midst of my breakdown, I would analyse, why do I not feel great today? Oh, and am I slipping back? Oh God, the world's ending because I've not had a great day. And then when I realised that actually regular people, for wanting a better word, have bad days. So even if I'm in full mental health, full good mental health, I'm still going to have a bad day. And it's not about, it's about realising I don't have to analyse that, because analysing it is making it worse, because I can't get the answer of why I'm having a bad day. I'm just having a bad day. And what I ended up having to do was separate out, actually, I'm having a bad day because of poor mental health, and I'm having a bad day just because I'm having a bad day. I've just woke up and I can't be bothered, and that's just, it's nothing to do with my mental health. It's just, something, whatever in my body is, whatever, maybe I'm just tired, maybe I've overworked or whatever, and that's okay.
Completely. And when I got that, that was game changing.
Absolutely.
Completely game changing because you're not fighting things anymore, because it takes so much energy to fight it. So you become exhausted. It's just so much.
You're searching for an answer to questions that you can't get an answer to, because you're asking yourself the questions. And as I've said, so the way I ended up looking at it was, I said that if someone has good mental health, they're still going to have bad days. They're still going to wake up some mornings and think, you know what, I can't be bothered. I just want to have a duvet day, or I just want to lie and watch Netflix, or whatever it is. And they don't give themselves a hard time about it. It's just, I'm just going to let the world pass me by today, and that's okay. But when you have poor mental health, you're asking yourself, why am I like this? Why is the world there? It isn't. You're just experiencing the same, but you're putting yourself on a quest to find out this is poor mental health. When actually it's no, you're just having not feeling it, and that's okay. And I think I say that to people that I help, that if you're having a bad day and you know that it's nothing to do with poor mental health, it's just that maybe you're tired or you're overworked, whatever, give yourself permission just to have the day off, or whatever it is, or just feel that way and eat a box of chocolates or whatever. The world's not going to end because you do that. But tomorrow when you wake up, go for it, or try and think, right, okay, that was yesterday. I don't have to feel that way today. Today I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and just make sure that one off day doesn't become one off week, two off weeks, and so on like that.
But Michael, the irony of that is that the next day, or however long it takes, you actually do get better. If you beat yourself up, you don't get better.
It's a perpetual circle, isn't it? You just go in this cycle of, why am I not feeling better? Why am I not feeling better? You're not feeling better because you're asking yourself, why am I not feeling better?
Yeah, but your brain's just like detecting danger, and it's going, no, and you, as you say, you get stuck in that perpetual cycle with thoughts, and then you get all sorts of emotions, and that dissociation if your emotions are overwhelming to do with the thoughts, and then you don't get better. But then you accept it. The next day you're fine.
I think we, as much as we're in the field that we're in, I think, we have to accept that we're human beings as well.
Yeah.
We're human beings, and I always say when I'm, doing my talks or whatever, my life is happier than it's ever been. Okay, and it's not because I've got a Mary Poppins life or anything like that. I don't, jump about the streets like Dick Van Dyke and all of that and Mary Poppins. Nothing like that. None of my life isn't like that anyway. But inside my heart, my soul, whatever, I'm happier than I've ever been, because for 47, 48 years, I was hiding everything. I couldn't talk, I couldn't deal with anything. And now that intrinsic happiness comes from not feeling shame, not feeling the fear of judgment, and not feeling all of that emotions, and now just actually accepting, do you know what? See, if I forget something, it's all right.
Yeah.
See, if I can't remember where I know Johnny Faye, that's all right as well. That's okay. And today I'm feeling good. I feel great today. And tomorrow I might not, but let's not worry about tomorrow. Today I feel all right, and that's all that matters.
And the word that resonates for me is content.
Yeah.
That just being okay, regardless whether you're having a great day or a bad day, just being content every day.
Absolutely. And again, as I said, that doesn't mean that, bad things or things couldn't go better during the day or that sort of stuff. It doesn't mean that everything's going to go perfect from the moment you wake to the moment you sleep. But it's about just saying, do you know what? Let's just keep it in context to what the day is. Okay, that didn't work. That's okay. Doesn't mean I have to jump off a metaphoric cliff and think, oh, my world's terrible now. Or when you're struggling with your mental health, catastrophize. It's just saying, okay, that's what happened. That's what it is. Right. Okay, I'm not happy about it. It's not great or whatever. I'm maybe feeling a bit down, but not the end of the world. And it's okay to feel this way as well. And
do you think a big problem though is society kind of pushes this notion of you need to be positive and happy all the time?
I mean, I'm all for positive. I'm a big believer in positivity, the law of attraction. If you believe there'll be positive outcomes, I absolutely believe in all of that, and that's what helps my mindset.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I don't have negative thoughts. It's about saying, okay, I'm having this negative thought, but actually I don't need to believe it. I don't need to do it. But I think there is this culture about, you always have to be positive. You can't be negative. But I think it's about, you can go too far with that as well. Just like you can be, it's like when you're around ultra negative people all the time. It's like, that'll never work. You want to avoid them, But equally, I think it's important that people don't always give this persona of I'm always positive, I'm always a believer, my world's perfect. Because the reality is that for all of us, it's not. You just have to try, push aside those negativities to believe that something positive's coming. And that's what I believe in.
Maybe positivity and negativity isn't kind of what I was meaning. Because you're right, I can be down and still be positive.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's that, I don't know, society sees things in, what's the word I'm trying to describe?
I think society sees it. I think sometimes there's polarised views in society of how we're meant to be. And I think to go beyond that creates a problem. So it's a bit like, let's not name a store, but there are famous stores that do Christmas adverts, okay? And they present a reality to us that perhaps says that you see the advert on television, everything's nice and warm, there's candles, the room's got a beautiful Christmas tree, and it's a family all sitting down, mother, father, grandparents, kids, grandkids, all sitting, having a wonderful Christmas dinner.
Yeah, who's had a Christmas like that?
That's the reality they project. That's not the reality for the majority of people. But we sit and watch that and think, it'd be beautiful to have that, or it might be great to have that, or I don't have that, so therefore my life is really bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger of, overstretching it to say, okay, look, we understand that life isn't like that, but for this, there's an advert, I know I'm talking away here, but I can't remember if it's, I think it might be for chips or something like that, right? I know that just sounds absurd, but it kind of goes along the lines of, for the mother who is all of these things, and for the father who's all of these things, and it says, perhaps a single parent, or same-sex marriage, or whatever, and it actually just shows the broad spectrum of what society is.
Yeah.
And I watch that every time, and I go, do you know what? That's great, because you feel included in that, whatever you are on it, as opposed to being isolated from a television advert that says, here's this image of Christmas, and if you're not in it, it's your fault.
Yeah. And but then we look at certain emotions that are, I guess, not persecuted in life, but suicide is one of them. Is that we do still, our society still sees suicide as, or suicidal thoughts as this, oh God, we can't talk about this. This is a fearful subject. If you're thinking about committing suicide, then you must be something wrong with you.
Yeah, and you know that, and I think that, as you said, a great word earlier on, that internalizes it for you, because you then think, I can't speak about it. So, and it's a bad thing. I know I'm having bad thoughts. Oh my goodness. And depending on how you're brought up, it's a bad thing to have bad thoughts, and all that sort of stuff. So, but for me, I remember having a discussion with a woman a long time ago when before I kind of opened up about all my suicide stuff. And her perspective was that it's not normal to want to commit suicide, because as a human being, our instincts are to survive. Mm-hmm. And I completely disagreed with us. And I remember saying, no, we don't all have instincts to survive. We might have a survival instinct, but it's not necessarily our instinct to survive, because we have thoughts and emotions that might want us to end our life. Yeah. And that's okay as well, to have those thoughts, it's because it's a thought process.
Because
but it's almost like you're castigated. You're no normal. I mean, I never opened up and said I had those thoughts. I just disguised it by saying, no, I don't think what you're saying is correct. I think that it's perfectly natural to have those thoughts, and you shouldn't be castigated for it. But I agree with you, society is, well, in my book, and again, it's not a plug for my book, but there's a chapter in it about saying we don't really talk about suicide, and the media don't really cover it unless it's a sensationalist case of maybe a high-profile star or whatever. And generally, the response is, why would they want to do it? Because they've got everything, But I think 2 years ago, there was 60 murders in Scotland. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure every murder that took place would have been on BBC Scotland News or STV or whatever television station you get. But in the same time, there were over 700 suicides in Scotland. Yeah. And I guarantee probably only a handful of those suicides would have been on any news. And even if they were on, they would have been dressed up as something other than suicide. It would have been, not spoken of as such. And because and even at that, when you watch that, you think there's 10 times more suicides in Scotland, and we don't report it. We don't openly talk about it. Why aren't we raising the question of, why is there 10 times more suicides? And why are we not telling people, look, this is actually a pandemic or an epidemic amongst, one of the statistics I know is that 10% or 11% of all suicides in Scotland 2 years ago were carried out in Lanarkshire. Mm-hmm. Why? Yeah. Why are we not asking that question? Why are we, detailing information and saying, okay, is it perhaps because it's an old industrial town that maybe men are perhaps feeling disenfranchised? Right, let's look at that. Yeah. But it gets very little coverage, I know that's a bit preachy there. I don't mean that to be preachy.
No, it's that people are afraid to open that Pandora's box because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to come from it. And I mean, that's not a blame on anyone, because lots of people don't have the tools to have those conversations. Because I don't know if you've experienced that, but sometimes when you have opened up to someone about your emotions, your mental health, you get that blank look, and they don't say anything.
It's because they know the guy in the pub speaking the same language as you.
Yeah, but you're going, I've just told you this, and you're saying nothing to me.
Listen, it doesn't go well, because I always think it doesn't go well because they've never been in that destination. They don't know what, they don't know how, they're the people that are speaking Greek and German and all that. And you want to open up to your nearest and dearest, but you can see the fear because no one knows what to say. During my talks, I always have a plenary session after it. And probably one of them, suicide comes up quite often, and especially when we're doing mental health training and stuff like that, where people are saying, I'm scared. If someone approaches me about it, I'm scared in case I say the wrong thing. Yeah. And I always say to people, look, see if someone's coming to talk to you and they want to talk to you about their suicidal thoughts, they're coming because you've got 2 ears, okay? They're not coming really to ask you for your advice and so on. Yeah. They're coming to ask, really what they want you to do is to listen to them. Yeah. And at the end of listening to them, say, okay, how can I help you? Yeah, respond. That's all it is. It's such a simple thing. How can I hear you?
How can I help? That's it. Just
That's all it takes.
They've just told you, I want to commit suicide. And usually people don't have the blank face when someone says that, or someone says, oh, I'm so depressed, my life's miserable, and they just don't say anything, and that person will go away and go, there is something wrong with me because that other person can't respond.
In an employment capacity, and I know that may be something that we speak about in our webinar, but the way I speak to employers about it and people who have well-being roles within the workplace and perhaps mental health first aiders is the way I kind of say to them, like, okay, Mr. Smith, Johnny Smith comes and talks to you about his mental health and so on. Don't reach for your policies and procedures because it's not about that, right? Don't reach for your policies and say, I know exactly what to do because our policy says this. What I always say is, if your pal came and says to you, listen, I'm really struggling with my mental health, you'd say, okay, I'll meet you for a coffee and we'll have a wee chat about it and let's just see what, let's see what comes there, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You approach it totally differently if it was your friend as it was to your employee. But why? You don't have to. So if Mr. Smith or whatever in your workplace is coming and saying, I'm struggling with my mental health, don't reach for your policies. Just open up the conversation and say, okay, well, tell me what's going on. How can I help you? Right? What can we do for you as an organisation? How can we do it? What, blah, blah, blah. And
it's not anything big. It's such a small thing.
See if your pal came and says to you, I'm struggling with mental health, you wouldn't go and say, actually, I've got a set of policies in my work, I'll go and get them. You wouldn't, you'd say,
Google it.
Tell me about it, right? How can I help you? Or you might have that blank expression, but you'd come out of that, but you'd say, tell me about it. How can I help you? Because I really want to help you make sure that I can do something for you.
And while they might speak a different language, I wrote about this recently about empathy. It's just finding that one little thing, because we have all experienced individual emotions. So everyone will have experienced fear. Everyone will have experienced sadness. Yeah, it won't be to the same extent as someone with a mental health condition. But think about that sadness.
Yeah.
And then think about what that person's going through if they're feeling sad. And we can relate. That's our in.
That's the word I was going to say there as you were speaking. It's about relating it. It's not, you don't have to have the same experiences. But I guarantee you'll have had one of the same emotions. And that's the one that you want to go to. Because we've all been there when someone says, oh, I know how you feel. You don't know how I feel. But what you say is, look, I know what it's like when something like whatever it is has happened because I've been there. When I came out of the Clutha disaster and all of that, there's no, somebody saying to me, I know how you feel. No, you don't. Unless you've been, a helicopter landing on top of you, it's not going to help me, you saying, I know how you feel.
Yeah.
But somebody saying to me, look, I know what it's like to survive something like that because I've been in this, instantly makes you want to gravitate. As we said, it's that kind of language, speaking the same language, you gravitate towards them. Because when you're struggling with your mental health, you don't think that anyone can help you or has the same experiences as you, because your brain tries to trick you into thinking you're the only one.
Yeah.
You're the only one. Nobody's like you. You're the weird person. And don't tell anybody because you're going to get it even worse. But your mind's tricking you because, as I always say, 1 in 4 people at any given time are struggling with their mental health. And, when I do talks and stuff like that. So, I just take it in the context of if 1 in 4 people are struggling with mental health at this moment in time, in Scotland right now, that means that 1.5 million people are struggling with their mental health. The last thing you are is alone. Far from it. You're in the biggest club in Scotland just now if there's 1.5 million of us, It's if I had to say to you, there's 1.5 million people just like you and I, Roxanne, just now, you'd be like, brilliant.
Maybe we need to start giving out membership cards.
I'm in the gang. But the mind tells you, oh no, it's just you. So you can't tell anybody, because if you tell somebody, they're going to think, But actually, when you do tell someone and you get the right person, it's like, so am I. I'm struggling, and I know Johnny around the corner struggling, and we go to a wee group, do you want to come? And then you realise that you're actually not alone. And I think that's the biggest positive.
And I actually think, obviously I'm maybe a bit biased because I'm a therapist, but all workplace managers they would benefit so much from learning basic counselling skills. Just that listening and reflecting, because that's all you need, really.
Absolutely. I see it slightly differently because I do things slightly differently, but I absolutely see that. What I always think is that, we all have lived experience.
Yeah.
We've all got a lived experience, and okay, mine's is off the chart with regards to trauma and using that in what I do. But we don't always have to be bosses. We can be human beings first and foremost.
Yeah, people forget that.
Forget that. You know, it's almost like, and I know we can speak about this at another time, but it's kind of like the higher up the hierarchy of management you go, you feel like you have to be less human, or there are instances where you have to be less human and more corporate, for want of a better word.
I
You don't
think,
have to be.
no, but I think this does deserve a whole different conversation, because I think the higher you go up, the fear of losing control, and that's a whole fight or flight thing going on is there as well.
But I always think that first and foremost, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
And we all happen to be what we are in our career. That's just what we do, but it's not who we are.
Yeah.
And, our experiences are who we are. And I know that's a way of the chart and a whole load of things, but, I've done loads of talks, and some of the most beautiful parts of it have been when the lead person in the talk, whether it's the chief executive or whatever, has spent 10 minutes after it and spoke about something that he's been through, and had the nerve to do it, and had the willingness to do it, and the awareness to do it, because then he knows that, or she knows that they're giving themselves something away, and they're changing the perspective of their staff towards them. But it can only be positive, because the staff, that workforce, those delegates there, will see Johnny or Janie and Johnny as a human being. Then they've shared something with me that they've kept, and actually I've been there as well. I know what that's like. We've shared something in common, it could be whatever it is, and that gets a connection.
Yeah, and you need that human connection, that complete vulnerability. And that, I think, managers, that it's self-awareness, because self-awareness allows us to be vulnerable, and it also allows us to give up control. Because when we're not in control, we can be vulnerable.
Yeah. Do you know, it's one of the most beautiful things for me. I've always said that everything for me was against asking for help. I could never ask for help. I could never utter those 4 letters out of my mouth and ask for help because of the fear. And in the early stages of when I was doing what I'm doing now, I was doing a talk at the Radisson Hotel in Glasgow. Anyway, there was 500 people there, and done a talk. It was good laugh, good fun, in what I was doing. And as I was finishing, got a standing ovation. So I kind of did that typical Glasgow bloke thing where I'm saying, sit down, I don't know you, I don't want a standing ovation. Anyway, I took my seat, and after me, it was finishing up, and there was like a kind of chorus choir on. They were brilliant. But anyway, at the corner of my eye, I could see this chap kind of trying to make eye contact with me. So ultimately, a couple of minutes later, he stood up and he came over, and he said to me, "That was fantastic. You were so brave. Can you help me?" Right? And it was just the man reaching out for help. And I always, and then introduced, gave him support and took him on to one of my support groups and stuff like that. But anyway, he always said to me, "You're so brave getting up on that stage and talking in front of 500 people and talking about all your stuff." I said, "Look, no, you're braver than me." He said, "How am I braver than you?" And I would laugh, and I'd say, "You're braver than me. I stood up in front of 500 people and told them my story. That's easy. What you did is you stood up in front of 500 people and approached a complete stranger and asked for help. That's bravery.
Completely.
What I did was easy. What you did was something I could never do."
Yeah, people don't see it like that. And I think only through talking about it can they realise that actually it is a brave thing and a strength.
Absolutely. And I wish I had that strength. And I'm always completely in awe of people who reach out and ask for help. I think, and if I'm lucky enough to be the one they reach out to, I'm always humbled by that someone thinks that I could be able to help them. But, that, because I never was able to ask for help for a variety of reasons, but I absolutely see it as a strength. I know society tells us that actually it's not, it can be a weakness asking for help, and depending on the environment that you're in, but it's an absolute strength.
And we need to change society so that they can ask anybody for help.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not, they can come up and speak to us because it's a field we work in, we've got experience, but they don't, if they were to go and speak to someone and get that blank expression, that might stop them ever speaking about it again.
Absolutely. And I know that because of the culture, the roles that we're in, but for me, it's about creating a workplace culture that absolutely allows openness for both men and women to say, "I'm struggling with my mental health," without it being detrimental to their career going forward in any way. And I think all too often, certainly I've seen it as career suicide to ask for help and support. But I think that if we can change the culture within organisations that say, look, we absolutely understand that on any given day, we are going to have staff who may be struggling with their mental health as a result of life events going on, particularly this moment in time. So we absolutely want to help and support them. And I think that alone would send out a message to staff to say, do you know what, it is okay. And actually, let's go and talk to Roxanne. I wouldn't mind having a chat with Michael or whomever it is, because they're not going to be judged, and it's a safe space and environment, and it's not punitive in any way of you're going to get sent to such and such. It's come and speak to us. Let's have a conversation.
And it's about tapping into that genuineness. I wrote about that in the article I posted today.
Because
you can tell when someone, because paying lip service. On you, and that's back to that policy and procedure thing. Oh yeah, we have this policy to do A, B, and C. Here's some support for you. You can totally tell, and it doesn't really. The activity itself. I'm not saying that these programs are great, and the activity themselves are brilliant, but it's that relationship between the manager and them that there's a gap in it, and that's where having self-awareness and realizing that you are a human being just allows you're able to have then a genuine connection.
Absolutely. Employees are human beings. First and foremost, they may have a family, they may have whatever it is outside the work, but they're an employee, but they're also a human being that have all these other things going on in their life. And I just think it's important that we try and assist people to speak openly about their mental health in an environment that's not punitive, that's conducive to support people. And one of the things I always say is that organisations have policy and procedures for multiple things, and I guarantee you, most organisations will have a policy and procedure for sickness and absence. And I always say, okay, so do you have a policy for mental health sickness and absence? Because the sickness and absence policy is likely to be for physical illness. It'll be, feeling sick or twisting your ankle, climbing a hill or whatever. But what procedures do you have in place if someone's actually struggling with their mental health? Because if they have to follow the physical ill health policy, I guarantee that it's phoning your line manager to say you won't be in. And if you're struggling with your mental health, the last thing you really want to do, and certainly I wasn't going to do it, was to phone my chief executive and say, I'm struggling with my mental health.
No, I actually was telling my partner about the service that you kind of offer about being that third party, because I genuinely think that's genius. Because I'm exactly the same. You make up something, you can really get out of bed, but suddenly you've got sickness bug, because and you do that thing, you phone and you put on the voice.
It's and I think that we offer that service, but to actually just have the conversation that says, look, okay, you've got a physical ill health policy. I get that you phone in on the first day in the second, whatever it may be, and you phone in your boss and say, I've been a bit numpty, I've twisted my ankle playing football or whatever. Then it's kind of like, right, okay, anyway, I'll see you in a couple of days. But if you have to phone up and say, I'm really struggling with mental health, right, okay. First of all, you don't want to phone your boss because it may be, certainly for me, I view it as career suicide. But then it changes the dynamic of everything. You opening up and saying, I'm struggling with my mental health, because then all of a sudden you're putting that onto somebody who might think, I don't know what to do, or judge you as being a danger, or what do I do, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas we say, okay, if you don't have a policy in place internally, we'll create one with you, and we'll be that third party where John could phone up and say, I'm struggling.
Managers have this fear that people will take advantage. Oh yeah, they've got mental health today. They're going to have that's going to be the norm now. And it's not.
I mean, I've had that conversation, and I suppose it's all in our nature somehow, somewhere, to be cynical about something. Where it may well be that, and that organisation may just be cynical about creating a mental health policy that allows an employee to swing the lead or skive off for a day. But the way we set it up is that, okay, if you phone and say you're not coming in, you get to speak to one of us who's got lived experience of poor mental health and struggling with it. So you kind of have to have that conversation with us. And believe me, if you're not struggling with your mental health, you're likely to be found out relatively in a short period of time that, okay, well, tell me what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, right? Okay, what can we do for you? you don't get that with physical ill health. You just generally get to phone in and say, I've hurt my ankle, I'll go to my doctor's, and your boss has got to say, okay, no bother.
Yeah.
So we actually have that added bit built in where the person has to, as part of the return thing, we want to help people to get to work. So if you're genuinely struggling with mental health, it would be beneficial to speak to us. So it's a good thing that we're doing. It's not a punitive measure.
Yeah.
And I can't see that, sorry.
At the end of the day, it's trust. Yeah, there will be a couple that take advantage of it, but a good workplace is based on trust.
Absolutely, Roxanne. But equally, not everyone, and in my experience, not everyone who phones in sick is sick either, or physical health. So what's the difference? Why are you penalising? Why don't you want to set this process up for people who struggle with their mental health because someone might be at it and fool you? Actually, that's what's going on in your physical policy because every Monday or every third Monday that there's a football game on, Johnny's going to phone in on a Monday and say he's got a sore back when he's been out on the Raz on the on a Sunday night or whatever. So people do take advantage or think I've got no holidays left, but I want a day off. I'll phone in sick. This takes to not accept that that's what happens. A bit naive. It is what happens. So to then be reluctant to set up a mental health sickness policy because somebody might take advantage of it, well, it didn't stop you from setting up a physical health policy. So, but I mean, that's not meant to be judgmental. It's just it's just to try and get a different thought process in that actually we do need to adapt policies to mental health, poor mental health, because if our workforce is struggling, we do want to help them. You get more back by helping people than you do by punishing people.